The purple clouds covered the sky like a blanket. Through those clouds came a ship that had seen many battles. Its metal skin was covered in dents and burn marks. The ship had a name painted on its side in strange letters. In the human language, that name meant Bloodclaw. Inside the ship, Captain Vexthor stood tall. He was not human. His body was covered in thick scales that looked like armor. He had 4 eyes that could see in many directions at once. His hands ended in sharp claws that could cut through metal. He was a Crithian, and his people were known across the galaxy as slavers. Vexthor looked at the screen in front of him. It showed a small village far below on the planet's surface. Humans lived there, not many, maybe 300 at most. They had come to this world to start a new life. They had farms and simple houses. They had no weapons that could hurt his ship. They had no army to protect them. Perfect, Vexthor thought. This would be easy. The Crethians called it a harvest, but that was just a pretty word. What they really did was steal people and sell them as slaves. The big government in space, the Galactic Council, knew about it, but they did nothing to stop it. Human settlements this far from Earth were not important to them. In the village below, a man named Jake Morrison was teaching a class. He stood in front of 20 children in a small building made of wood. The children sat on benches and listened as he talked about which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make them sick. Jake had gray hair and lines on his face that showed his age. He had been a soldier once, many years ago on Earth. He had fought in something called the Border Wars. After that, he wanted peace. He wanted quiet. So he came here with his wife, Linda, to help build this new colony. The children liked Jake. He was patient and kind, but he was also strong. Sometimes he would show them how to tie knots or build a fire without matches. He would tell them stories about Earth, about oceans that went on forever, and cities with buildings that touched the sky. The children would listen with wide eyes, trying to imagine such things. That morning, everything changed. A loud sound filled the air. It was the warning siren that sat on top of the tallest building. The sound meant danger was coming. Jake's face went hard. He knew that sound. He had heard it before in the war. The children started to cry. Jake held up his hand. "Be quiet," he said. "Listen to me. Go to your homes. Find your parents. Stay inside and lock your doors." The children ran out of the building as fast as they could. Jake ran too. He ran to his house where Linda was waiting. She looked scared. She knew what the siren meant. Everyone in the colony knew. Raiders, slavers, people who came to steal other people. The ship landed in the middle of the village. Its metal feet crushed the garden that the colonists had worked so hard to grow. The back of the ship opened like a mouth, and out came the Crethians. They wore heavy armor that covered their bodies. They carried weapons that shot blue light instead of bullets. Those weapons did not kill. They made people fall down and stop moving. Dead slaves were worth nothing. Live slaves could be sold. The Crethians moved fast. They kicked down doors. They grabbed people and dragged them out of their homes. They put metal bands on people's wrists. The bands were made of energy that burned hot if anyone tried to pull them off. Families screamed. Children cried for their mothers and fathers. But the Crethians did not care. They had done this 100 times before. Jake tried to fight. He punched one Crethian in the face and knocked him down. He kicked another one in the leg and made him fall, but there were too many. 20 Crethians surrounded him. They hit him with their weapons. They kicked him when he fell. They dragged him by his arms to the ship. Inside the ship was a large room with bars like a cage. The Crethians threw Jake inside. He hit the floor hard. Around him, other colonists sat or stood or lay crying. He saw people he knew. The farmer who grew wheat, the woman who fixed broken machines, the old man who told jokes. All of them were here. All of them were prisoners now. But it was the children who made Jake's heart hurt. In a different cage, smaller than the one he was in, 37 children were pressed together. The youngest was only 5 years old. The oldest was 16. They cried and called for their parents. Some of the parents in Jake's cage cried back and pressed their faces against the bars, trying to reach their children. But the cages were too far apart. Jake watched the children. He saw Sophie, the 13-year-old girl with green eyes who always asked questions in his class. He saw Danny, the 10-year-old boy who loved to take things apart to see how they worked. He saw Paul, the 16-year-old farm boy who was strong but gentle. All of them were scared. All of them were crying. The ship began to shake. The engines were starting. They were leaving the planet. Jake felt the floor press up against him as the ship went higher and higher into the sky. Soon, they would be in space. Soon they would be far from any help. Captain Vexthor walked past the cages. He was talking to another Crithian, one with red marks on his armor that meant he was second in command. They spoke in their own language. Most humans could not understand Crithian words, but Jake could. He had learned their language during the war. He had needed to know what the enemy was saying. Vexthor looked at the children's cage and laughed. The sound was ugly and mean. "Human cubs are weak," he said in Crithian. "They will break easily in the training pits. Good profit from the soft ones. We will get much money for them." Jake's blood turned cold. The training pits. He knew about those places. He had seen videos during the war. They were places where young slaves were taught to obey through pain and fear. Most children who went to the training pits did not come out alive. Those who did were changed forever. Their eyes were empty. Their spirits were broken. They became tools, not people. The second in command nodded. "The human young are smaller than other species," he said. "They look fragile, easy to train, easy to sell. No one will expect them to cause trouble." Vexthor laughed again. They walked away, still talking about how much money they would make. Jake sat very still. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. He was angry, more angry than he had been in 20 years. These creatures thought human children were weak. They thought human children would be easy to break. They had no idea what they had just done. Jake looked around the cage. He looked at the other adults. Most of them were farmers or teachers or builders. They were good people who had never hurt anyone. But Jake was different. Jake had been trained to fight. Jake had been trained to kill. And most important, Jake had been trained to never give up. He looked at the children's cage again. Sophie had stopped crying. She was hugging a younger child, trying to make him feel better. Danny was looking around, probably trying to figure out how the cage lock worked. Paul was standing at the bars, his hands gripping the metal so hard his knuckles were white. These were not weak cubs. These were human children, and human children were different from any other species in the galaxy. Other species protected their young by hiding them. Humans protected their young by teaching them to fight. Jake made a decision. The Crithians thought this would be easy. They thought they could take human children and break them. They were wrong. Jake was going to show them just how wrong they were. He was going to teach these children to bite back. And when they did, the Crithians would learn a lesson they would never forget. They would learn that humans were not prey. They would learn that threatening human children was the worst mistake anyone could make. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. The stars outside became long streaks of light. They were going somewhere far away, somewhere dark and terrible. But Jake was not afraid anymore. He was ready, and soon, the children would be ready too. 6 days passed. 6 long days inside the ship. Jake counted every hour, every minute. He needed to know the patterns. He needed to understand how this ship worked. The adult prisoners were given drugs. The Crithians put needles in their arms twice a day. The drugs made people slow and confused. They made people stop caring about anything. Most of the adults just sat on the floor with blank faces. They did not talk. They did not think. They were like empty shells, but Jake was different. His body had been trained years ago to handle poisons. The military had given him treatments that made his blood work faster. The drugs still affected him, but not as much as the others. He could still think. He could still plan. He pretended to be more drugged than he was. He let his head hang down. He let his eyes go half closed. The guards thought he was harmless. That was good. Let them think that. The children were not given drugs. The Crithians wanted them awake. They wanted them scared. Fear was a weapon, the Crithians believed. If you made children afraid enough, they would obey anything. But fear can do something else too. Fear can make you angry, and anger can make you strong. Jake watched the guards. There were 12 of them working in shifts. 4 guards would work for 8 hours. Then 4 different guards would come. They changed shifts 3 times a day. Jake memorized which guards were lazy and which ones paid attention. There was one guard who was young. His name was Scar. Jake heard the other guards call him that. Scar was maybe 20 years old in human counting. He was new at this job. He talked too much and watched too little. He liked to show off his muscles and his weapon. Scar was going to be Jake's way out. Jake also watched the ship itself. He saw which doors needed special cards to open. He saw which hallways had cameras and which did not. He saw where the armory was, where they kept the weapons. He saw where the engine room was, where the big machines that made the ship fly were kept. Most important, he watched the children. Sophie was taking care of the little ones. She told them stories to keep them calm. She shared her food with the youngest. She was brave even though Jake could see she was scared too. Danny was looking at everything. His eyes were always moving, always studying. Jake saw him staring at the lock on their cage for hours. The boy was smart. He was trying to figure out how it worked. Paul, the big farm boy, stood near the bars like a wall between the younger children and the guards. He did not say much, but his eyes were hard. Jake recognized that look. It was the look of someone ready to fight. On the 3rd day, Jake managed to catch Sophie's eye. He waited until the guards were not looking. Then he made a sign with his hands. It was a military signal. He had taught it to the colony children during their lessons. It meant, "Stay calm, help is coming." Sophie's eyes went wide. She understood. She made a small sign back. Jake saw hope light up in her face like a candle in the dark. Over the next 3 days, Jake and Sophie talked in signals. It was slow. They could only do it when guards were not watching. But bit by bit, Jake told her his plan. He told her to watch and wait. He told her to be ready. He told her to trust him. On the 5th night, everything was ready. Scar was on duty. He came to bring food to the prisoners. He carried a tray with bowls of gray paste. It did not taste good, but it kept people alive. That was all the Crithians cared about. Scar walked to Jake's cage. He put the tray down and opened the small slot at the bottom to push the bowls through. He was looking at his communication device, reading messages from his friends. He was not paying attention. Jake was lying on the floor. His eyes were almost closed. He looked like all the other drugged prisoners. Scar glanced at him and saw nothing dangerous, just another broken human. Scar bent down to push a bowl through the slot. His face came close to the bars. Jake moved. His hand shot out faster than Scar could see. His fingers wrapped around Scar's throat. He pulled the guard's face hard against the bars. Scar tried to yell, but Jake's other hand covered his mouth. Jake knew exactly where to press. Crethians had a nerve bundle at the base of their skull. Press it the right way and they go to sleep instantly. Jake had learned this in the war. He pressed hard. Scar's eyes rolled back. His body went limp. Jake held him for a moment longer to make sure, then carefully lowered him to the floor. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds. The other prisoners did not even notice. They were too drugged to care. Jake reached through the bars and searched Scar's belt. He found the access card. He found the weapon, a small gun that shot blue stunning light. He found the communication device. He took all of it. The access card opened the cage door. Jake stepped out. His legs were shaky from days of sitting, but he made them work. He had to. He dragged Scar's body into the cage and closed the door again. Let them find him later. Jake moved through the ship like a shadow. He remembered the layout. He knew which cameras to avoid. He kept to the walls, staying in the dark corners. His military training came back like riding a bicycle. Your body never forgets. It took him 10 minutes to reach the children's cage. He used the access card. The lock clicked open. The children looked up, startled. Some started to make noise. Jake put his finger to his lips. Quiet. They understood. Sophie stood up. She looked at Jake and then at the open door. Her eyes asked a question. "Are we really escaping?" Jake shook his head. Not yet. He motioned for her to come close. She did. He handed her Scar's weapon. Her hand shook as she took it. She had never held a gun before. Jake whispered very quietly. Listen carefully. We are not running away. There is nowhere to run. We are on a ship in space. But we can take this ship. We can make it ours. Sophie's eyes went even wider. Take the ship? How? Jake smiled. It was not a nice smile. By showing them that human cubs are not weak. By teaching them what happens when they threaten our children. by making them wish they had never heard of humans. He looked past Sophie at the other children. They were all watching now. The little ones held hands. The bigger ones stood up straight. They were scared, but they were also angry. They were ready. Jake spoke to all of them. Keep your voices down. What I'm about to tell you will be hard. It will be scary. But you can do it. You are human. That means you are stronger than they think. That means you can fight back. Danny raised his hand like he was in school. Jake almost laughed. The boy could not help it. Even now he remembered his manners. What do you need me to do? Danny whispered. Jake knelt down so he was at Danny's level. I need you to break things. Important things. Can you do that? Danny nodded. His eyes were bright. Breaking things was something he understood. Jake looked at the older children. I need fighters. People who can be brave even when they are scared. People who can follow orders and trust me. Paul stepped forward. I can do that. 2 more teenagers stepped forward. A girl named Kelly and a boy named Marcus. They nodded. We can help. Jake looked at the youngest children. You have the most important job. You will be safe, but you will also help us win. Do you trust me? A little girl named Emma nodded. She was only 6 years old. You saved us before. You will save us again. Jake felt his throat get tight. These children trusted him. They believed in him. He could not let them down. He took a deep breath. Here is what we are going to do. The Crithians think we are weak. They think we will just cry and give up. We are going to show them they are wrong. We are going to show them what human children can do when they fight back. Sophie held the weapon tighter. When do we start? Jake looked at the clock on the wall. In 2 hours, the guards will change shifts. That is when we strike. That is when we show these slavers what it means to bite back. The children gathered close. Jake began to explain the plan. It was dangerous. It was crazy, but it might just work. And if it did, the galaxy would never forget what happened on this ship. They would never forget the day that human cubs became human wolves. The plan was simple. That was good. Simple plans worked better than complicated ones. Jake had learned that in the war. When things go wrong, and they always go wrong, simple plans can be fixed. Complicated plans just fall apart. Jake divided the children into 3 groups. The youngest children, the ones from 5 to 8 years old, would go with Danny. Their job was to reach the ship's engine room and break the environmental controls. Those were the machines that made air and heat. If those machines stopped working, the Crithians would panic. Danny knew machines. His father had been an engineer. Danny had spent his whole life taking things apart and putting them back together. If anyone could break the environmental controls, it was him. The little kids would help him crawl through the small spaces that adults could not fit through. The middle group of children, ages 9 to 13, would be scouts. Sophie would lead them. They would crawl through the air vents and the maintenance tunnels. They would make noise in different parts of the ship. They would make the Crithians think there were attacks happening everywhere. They would create confusion and fear. The oldest children would be fighters. Paul, Kelly, Marcus, and 4 other teenagers would stay with Jake. He would teach them how to fight, where to hit a Crithian to hurt them, how to move quietly, how to use surprise as a weapon. Jake only had 2 hours to teach them everything. It was not enough time. In the military, training took months. But these kids were smart and they were motivated. When your life depends on it, you learn fast. He showed them the weak spots on a Crithian body, the nerve cluster at the base of the skull, the joint behind the knee that would make them fall, the soft spot on their throat where the scales were thin. He made them practice on each other, pulling their strikes at the last second so no one got hurt. Paul was a natural. He was big and strong from working on the farm. When he hit hard. Kelly was fast. She could dodge and move like a dancer. Marcus was smart. He asked questions about strategy and tactics. The others watched and learned. When the 2 hours were up, Jake looked at his small army. Children, they were just children. The youngest was 5. The oldest was 16. They should have been playing games or doing schoolwork. Instead, they were preparing for war. But Jake also saw something else in their eyes. He saw determination. He saw courage. He saw the same look he had seen in the eyes of soldiers 3 times their age. These kids were ready. The attack began at exactly Oro 300 ship time. That was 3 in the morning. Most of the Crithian crew would be asleep. Only 4 guards would be awake. This was the best time to strike. Danny and his team of little kids reached the engine room first. The door was locked, but Danny had Scar's access card. The door opened. Inside, huge machines hummed and glowed. Pipes ran everywhere like metal snakes. Screens showed numbers and symbols that Danny understood. He found the environmental control panel. It was high up on the wall, but little Emma climbed on Danny's shoulders and reached it. Danny told her which buttons to push. Red ones. Push all the red ones. Emma pushed the buttons. Alarms started to scream. The temperature began to drop. The oxygen levels began to fall. All over the ship, Crithians would be waking up, confused and scared. At the same moment, Sophie's team was moving through the air vents. They banged on the metal walls. They made strange noises. They dropped things down into hallways. One girl named Lisa threw a piece of metal at a guard. It hit him on the head and he fell down, stunned. The Crithians ran out of their rooms. They were cold. They were breathing hard because the air was getting thin. They saw movement in the shadows. They heard noises from everywhere. They shot their weapons at nothing. They yelled at each other. They were panicking. That was when Jake and his fighters struck. They hit the armory. This was the room where all the weapons were kept. 2 guards stood outside the door. They were looking around nervously, trying to figure out what was happening. Jake came at them from behind. He moved like a cat, silent and fast. He hit the first guard in the nerve cluster. The guard dropped without a sound. Paul was right behind Jake. He tackled the second guard and pressed his hand over the guard's mouth so he could not yell. Jake finished him with a strike to the temple. They dragged the guards inside the armory and locked the door. Now they had weapons. Real weapons. Not just one small gun, but dozens of them. Rifles that shot stunning blasts. Grenades that made loud noises and bright flashes. Armor vests that could stop bullets. Jake gave weapons to each of the teenagers. He showed them how to hold the rifles, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger slowly, not jerk it. They practiced for 2 minutes. That was all the time they had. Now came the hard part. They needed to free the adult prisoners. Jake led his team through the corridors. They moved fast. Speed was important now. The Crithians were confused, but they would not stay confused forever. Soon they would organize. Soon they would fight back. They reached the prisoner cages. 4 guards were there, trying to calm the drugged adults who were starting to wake up because of all the noise. The guards did not see Jake and his team coming. Jake fired first. His blast of blue light hit one guard in the chest. The guard flew backward and hit the wall. Paul fired next. His shot was not as good. It hit the guard in the leg. But the guard still went down. The other 2 guards tried to run. Kelly and Marcus shot them. Both guards fell. It was over in seconds. Jake opened the cages. Linda was there, his wife. She looked at him with confused eyes. The drugs were wearing off, but she was still slow. Jake helped her stand up. He gave her a weapon. "Can you fight?" he asked her. Linda nodded. "For our children, I can fight." Other adults were standing now. They were angry. The drugs made them slow, but anger burned through the fog in their heads. They grabbed weapons from the guards. They were ready to fight. Jake now had an army. Not a big army. Not a trained army. But an army of people who were fighting for their families. That made them dangerous. The battle for the ship lasted 3 more hours. The Crithians fought back hard. They were professional soldiers. They had training. They had armor. But they were scattered. They were cold. They were scared. And they were fighting against people who had nothing to lose. Sophie's team kept moving through the vents. They sabotaged the communication systems so the Crithians could not call for help. They cut power to different sections of the ship. They were everywhere and nowhere like ghosts. Danny's team kept the environmental systems broken. The ship got colder and colder. The Crithians moved slower. They could not breathe well. They made mistakes. Jake's fighters moved through the ship section by section. They cleared each hallway, each room. Some Crithians surrendered. Some fought and lost. By dawn, only one section of the ship was still in Crithian hands. The bridge. Captain Vexthor had locked himself inside with his best guards. He controlled the ship's navigation from there. He could still fly the ship. He could still try to escape. Jake stood outside the sealed bridge door. Behind him were 37 children. They held weapons. Their faces were dirty. Some had scratches and bruises, but they stood tall. They had fought and they had won. Jake spoke in Krithian loud and clear. He knew Vexthor could hear him through the door. "Last chance, Captain. Open this door, surrender, we will let you live." There was silence. Then Vexthor's voice came through a speaker. "You are making a mistake, human. We have ships. We have fleets. They will hunt you down. They will kill you all." Jake smiled. "Maybe. But first they will have to catch us. And before that happens, you said something I want you to think about. You said human cubs were weak. You said they would break easily. Look around, Captain. Do these cubs look broken to you?" Sophie stepped forward. She raised her weapon and pointed it at the door. "We are not broken. We are angry, and we are done being scared." The other children raised their weapons too. Even little Emma, who was too small to hold a gun, held up a piece of metal pipe like a sword. Jake spoke again. "Open the door, Captain, or we will open it for you, and I do not think you want to see what these cubs can do when they really bite back." Captain Vexthor did not surrender. He was too proud, too angry. He had raided hundreds of colonies. He had taken thousands of slaves. He had never lost before. He could not accept that humans had beaten him. He could not accept that human children had taken his ship. Instead, he tried to jump the ship to faster than light speed. If he could reach a Krithian military base, he could get help. He could retake his ship. He could make these humans pay for what they had done. But Vexthor did not know about Danny. The 10-year-old boy had done more than just break the environmental controls. He had also disabled the jump drive. The ship was not going anywhere except where the humans wanted it to go. When Vexthor pressed the button to jump, nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He looked at his control panel and saw red warning lights everywhere. His ship was dead in space. Jake heard Vexthor yelling inside the bridge. The captain was screaming at his guards. "Fix it," he was saying. "Fix it now." But there was nothing to fix. The damage was done. Jake made a decision. They could wait for Vexthor to give up, or they could go in and take him. Waiting was safer. But Jake was tired of waiting. These children had been prisoners long enough. It was time to end this. He turned to Paul. "Can you break down a door?" Paul looked at the bridge door. It was thick metal, but there was a small panel next to it. That panel controlled the lock. If they could break that panel, maybe they could force the door open. Paul nodded. "I can try." Jake called Danny on the communication device. "We need power to the bridge door controls cut in 30 seconds. "Can you do that?" Danny's voice came back. "Easy. Cutting power now." The lights near the door went dark. Paul swung a metal pipe at the control panel. It smashed open. Sparks flew. He hit it again and again. The metal bent and broke. Finally, he reached inside and pulled out handfuls of wires. There was a grinding sound. The door shook. Then slowly, very slowly, it began to slide open. The emergency systems were trying to unlock it because they thought there was a fire or some other danger. The door opened just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Jake went first. He had his weapon ready. Behind him came Paul, Kelly, and Marcus. Behind them came Linda and the other adults. Behind them came the children, all 37 of them. Inside the bridge, Vexthor and 6 guards waited. They had their weapons pointed at the door. When Jake came through, they fired. Blue light filled the air. Jake dove to the side. One blast hit him in the shoulder. Pain exploded through his body. But the armor vest he was wearing absorbed most of it. He rolled behind a control console and fired back. The bridge became a war zone. Weapons fired from both sides. Paul took a hit in the leg but kept fighting. Kelly got behind a Krithian guard and hit him with the butt of her rifle. Marcus threw a stun grenade that made a loud bang and a bright flash. The Krithian guards were good fighters. They were trained soldiers, but they were trapped in a small room. They could not retreat. They could not call for help. And they were fighting against people who would not stop, who could not stop because their children were watching. One by one, the guards fell. One was hit by 3 stun blasts at once and went down hard. Another tried to rush the door and Paul tackled him. A third threw down his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. Finally, only Vexthor was left standing. He held his weapon with both hands. His 4 eyes looked around wildly. He was breathing hard. His scales were dark with sweat. Jake stood up. His shoulder hurt, but he could still move. He pointed his weapon at Vexthor. "It is over, Captain. Put down your weapon." Vexthor looked at him. Then he looked at the children crowding into the bridge behind the adults. His eyes went wide. He could not believe it. Children, human children, had taken his ship. Human children had defeated his crew. Impossible, Vexthor whispered. You are just cubs. You are supposed to be weak. Sophie stepped forward. She still held her weapon. Her green eyes were hard and cold. We are not weak. You were just stupid. Vexthor stared at her. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. He let it fall to the floor. He knew he was beaten. Jake walked over and picked up the weapon. He looked at Vexthor for a long moment. Part of him wanted to hurt this creature who had stolen children and planned to break their spirits. But Jake was not a murderer. He was a soldier. There was a difference. Besides, he had a better idea. Jake ordered the Crithians to be taken to the cargo hold. All of them. Every Crithian on the ship who was still alive. There were 38 in total. Some were wounded. All were defeated. They were put in the same cages where the humans had been kept. Jake thought that was fitting. Then Jake gathered everyone in the main hold. Humans and Crithians together. The humans stood free. The Crithians stood behind bars. It was time to send a message. Jake pulled Vexthor forward so the captain could see everyone. Then he spoke in Crithian. He made sure to record it on the ship's log. He wanted every word saved. You said human cubs would break easily, Jake said. You called them weak. You thought you could take them and train them and break their spirits. You were wrong. Do you know why you were wrong? Vexthor said nothing. His 4 eyes stared at the floor. Jake continued. You were wrong because you do not understand humans. We are not like other species. When you threaten our young, you do not face an enemy. You face something much worse. You face every human who has ever loved a child. You face mothers and fathers and teachers and friends. You face millions of years of evolution that taught us to protect our children at any cost. He gestured to the children standing around the hold. Some still held weapons. Some had tears on their faces. But all of them stood straight and proud. But here's what you really missed, Jake said. These cubs you wanted to break? They did not need us to save them. They saved themselves. A 10-year-old broke your ship. A 13-year-old led attacks through your corridors. Teenagers took your weapons. Children you thought were weak showed you what humans really are. Jake pulled Vexthor closer. We are going to let you live. We are going to give you back your ship. Just enough fuel to reach the nearest station. And you are going to deliver a message to every slaver in the galaxy. What message? Vexthor asked quietly. Jake smiled. It was not a kind smile. Tell them about the cubs that fought back. Tell them about the children who took your ship. Tell them that humans protect their young. Tell them that when you corner a human, when you threaten our children, you better make sure you kill every single one of us. He leaned close to Vexthor's face. Because if you leave even one of us alive, we will teach our cubs to bite back, and they will show you what broken really means. Vexthor looked at Jake. Then he looked at the children. He saw their faces. He saw their weapons. He saw what they had done. And for the first time in his long life as a slaver, he felt real fear. Over the next week, the humans prepared the ship. Danny fixed the jump drive but made it so it could only make one jump. Just enough to get the Crithians to a station. Jake and the other adults trained the children in basic ship operations. If they were going to survive in space, they needed to know how to fly. Sophie learned how to read the navigation screens. Danny learned how the engines worked. Paul learned how to operate the weapon systems. Every child learned something useful. On the 7th day, it was time. Jake opened the cage holding Vexthor and his crew. The Crithians stepped out slowly, carefully. They looked at the humans with new eyes. These were not victims anymore. These were dangerous. Jake gave Vexthor a data chip. This contains the full recording of everything that happened. Show it to your people. Show it to everyone. Make sure they understand what happens when they try to take human children. Vexthor took the chip. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Jake. Why are you letting us live? We would not have shown you mercy. Jake glanced at the children standing behind him. Because we are not like you. We do not kill unless we have to. But make no mistake, Captain. If we ever see you again, if we ever hear that you have taken more slaves, we will not be so kind. Next time we finish it. The Crithians were put on a small escape ship. It was just big enough for all of them and had just enough fuel to reach the nearest station. Jake watched them go. The escape ship fired its engines and flew away into the darkness of space. Sophie stood next to Jake. Do you think they will really deliver the message? Jake nodded. They will. Not because they want to, but because they are scared. And fear is a powerful teacher. He turned to look at the children. All 37 of them. They had been through something terrible. They had been kidnapped and caged. But they had not broken. They had fought back. They had won. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson. Human cubs were not prey. They were the future. And that future had very sharp teeth. The Bloodclaw limped into Crithian Station Theta 9 3 weeks later. When the station's radar picked it up, the operators were surprised. The Bloodclaw was famous. Everyone knew that ship. Captain Vexthor had used it to raid colonies for 20 years. But something was wrong. The ship was moving slowly. Its distress signal was on. The station commander ordered a security team to board the vessel as soon as it docked. What they found shocked them. The ship was a mess. Burn marks on the walls. Broken equipment everywhere. And in the cargo hold they found Captain Vexthor and his crew. They were huddled together like frightened animals. Their eyes were empty. They looked like they had seen something terrible. The station commander demanded an explanation. What happened to you? Where are your prisoners? Vexthor handed over the data chip. Watch this, he said quietly. Then you will understand. The station commander took the chip to his office. He put it in his computer and pressed play. For the next hour he watched in disbelief. He saw human children executing military operations. He saw them sabotaging systems. He saw them fighting trained Crithian soldiers. He saw them win. The commander called his superior officers. They watched the recording. Then they called their superiors. Soon the recording was being watched by the highest levels of Crithian military command. Everyone who saw it had the same reaction. This is impossible, but it was not impossible. It was real. The recording showed everything. It showed children as young as 5 years old crawling through maintenance tunnels. It showed teenagers taking down armed guards. It showed a 10-year-old disabling a military-grade starship. The recording spread, first through the Crithian fleet, then to other species who traded with the Crithians, then across the entire frontier. Within weeks, every slaver in the galaxy had seen it. Every raider knew about it. Every colony attacker had watched it. The reaction was immediate. Human colonies reported fewer attacks. Slaver ships that used to target human settlements started avoiding them. Raiders who had once thought humans were easy prey now thought twice. The message was clear. Touch human children and face the consequences. It did not matter if the children looked small or weak. It did not matter if they seemed helpless. Human children would fight back. And when they did, they fought like nothing else in the galaxy. 2 months after the incident, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. Representatives from 200 species gathered to discuss what had happened. The human ambassador, a woman named Helen Cross, stood before them. For years you have ignored attacks on human colonies, Ambassador Cross said. You told us we were too far from the core worlds to matter. You told us to defend ourselves. Well, we did, and now you want to talk about it. The council members shifted uncomfortably. The attack on the Bloodclaw had made them nervous, not because they cared about the Crithians, but because it showed what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The council voted to extend new protections to human settlements. They increased patrols in the frontier zones. They passed laws making it illegal to target human colonies for slave raids. It was too little and too late, but it was something. Back on Nexara 7, the colony was rebuilding. The Crithians had destroyed many buildings when they attacked. But the colonists were strong. They worked together. They built new houses. They planted new gardens. They made their home better than before. Jake Morrison returned to his quiet life. He taught classes again. He helped build houses. He worked in the fields. But something had changed. The children he taught now looked at him differently. They knew what he had done. They knew he had saved them. More than that, they knew what they had done. They had saved themselves. They had fought back. They had shown the galaxy that human children were not victims. Sophie was different now. She was still kind. She still helped the younger children. But there was a hardness in her eyes that had not been there before. She had seen things no 13-year-old should see. She had done things no child should have to do. But she had survived. And she was stronger for it. Danny went back to taking things apart and putting them back together. But now he understood that machines could be weapons. He understood that knowing how things worked could save lives. He studied harder. He learned faster. He had a purpose now. Paul helped rebuild the colony with new energy. He was quiet as always, but when people asked him about what happened on the ship, he would just say, "We did what we had to do. We protected each other. That is what humans do." On the first anniversary of the attack, the colony held a ceremony. They built a monument in the center of the village. It was made of stone from the local quarry. On the stone were carved the names of all 37 children who had fought on the Blood Claw. At the base of the monument were words in both human English and Crythian script. The words were simple but powerful. They thought the cubs would break easily. They learned what happens when you threaten humanity's young. They learned how to bite back. People came from other colonies to see the monument. They brought their children. They told them the story of what had happened. They made sure every child knew that they were never helpless, that they were never alone, that they carried within them the strength to fight back if they needed to. Years passed. The children grew up. Sophie joined the Colonial Defense Force. She became a captain. She commanded her own ship. But she never forgot what she had learned on the Blood Claw. She kept a copy of Jake's recording. She played it for every new recruit. "You already have everything you need," she would tell them. "You are human. When it matters, when someone threatens what you love, you will know what to do. You will fight back. You will bite back." Danny became an engineer. He designed ships. He built weapons. He made sure that human colonies had the tools they needed to defend themselves. He never forgot how he had disabled a slaver ship with just his brain and his hands. Paul stayed on Nixara 7. He became a farmer like his father. He married and had children of his own. He taught them how to work the land. But he also taught them how to fight, just in case, because you never knew when you might need to protect what mattered. Across the frontier in hundreds of human colonies, the story spread. It became a legend. Parents told it to their children. Teachers told it in schools. It was passed down from generation to generation. The Battle of the Blood Claw, they called it. The day that human children showed the galaxy what they were made of. The day that cubs became wolves. The slavers never forgot either. Crythian captains would warn their crews, "Stay away from human colonies. Do not take human children. They are not worth the risk." Other species heard these warnings and spread them further. Humans became known across the galaxy for two things. First, they were fierce protectors of their young. Second, their young were dangerous when cornered. It was a reputation that saved lives. Raiders and slavers found easier targets. Human settlements were left alone. 10 years after the incident, Ambassador Helen Cross gave a speech at the Galactic Council. She stood before representatives of every major species and told them something important. "You have asked why humans fight so hard for their children. You have asked why we are so dangerous when our young are threatened. The answer is simple. Every species protects its offspring. But humans take it further. We do not just protect our own biological children. We protect all children." She paused and looked around the chamber. A human will die to save a child they have never met, a child from a different colony, a different nation, even a different species. It is not logical. It is not tactical. It is just who we are. The Crythians thought our cubs would break easily. They learned the truth. Our cubs do not break. They adapt. They fight. They survive. And they teach every generation that follows them to do the same. She held up a copy of the recording. "This is required viewing now in every human school, not because we want to glorify violence, but because we want every human child to know that they are never helpless, that they are never alone, that they carry within them the same strength that 37 children showed on a slaver ship 10 years ago." The council chamber was silent. Every representative understood now. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest. They were not the most advanced. But they were the only species that taught their young not just to survive, but to fight back. Ambassador Cross finished her speech with simple words. "The cubs learned to bite back, and the galaxy will never forget it." She was right. The galaxy never did forget. The story of the Blood Claw became part of history. It was studied in military academies. It was analyzed by strategists. It was told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. But the most important lesson was learned by human children themselves. They learned that they were not weak. They learned that they could fight back. They learned that being small did not mean being helpless. Jake Morrison lived to see his grandchildren grow up. He taught them the same lessons he had taught the colony children: how to survive, how to be strong, how to protect each other. And when they asked him about the blood claw, he would smile and say something simple: "You are never as weak as someone thinks you are. You are never as helpless as you feel. When it matters, when people you love are in danger, you will find strength you did not know you had." That is what it means to be human. The monument on Nexara 7 still stands. Visitors come from across the